In the 2010s, strange shapes started to appear on remote islands in the frozen far north. Everywhere you look, satellite imagery, thermal imaging, shipping data. It's clear that the era of a peaceful Arctic is well and truly over. And if melting sea ice means a race for resources and military control, there is only one winner.
Russia's claim. Russia's increased military activity.
Icebreakers, trade routes, airports, and nuclear submarine bases. But look closely and you can see that in places US capabilities in the far north have been left to rot. Aside from all the talk of invading Greenland, there is a feeling that a future conflict may well unfold across an Arctic battle space.
There's a back and forth that could potentially spin out into all-out conflict.
A fight that might even include China. We studied the maps, spoke to the experts, and sent our reporters to the world's largest island to find out if America's recent interest in the warming Arctic is too little too late. We're so used to seeing the world as a Mercator projection, but on a globe, and looking from the top, you can see why everyone wants a piece of the Arctic. For a start, less ice in a warming world, in theory, means more trade. Why travel from Shanghai to Rotterdam via the Suez Canal, when you can just skirt along the top of Russia and save 2 weeks of shipping time? This NASA visualization shows the Arctic sea ice shrinking through the spring and summer of 2025. By September, it had retreated further than the historical average, as shown by this yellow line. That's a loss of ice equivalent to the size of Alaska.
Something that we might once have thought as a frozen desert is now becoming increasingly open water. You know, the Arctic Ocean is a place where you can travel through.
Research by the Arctic Council shows that ships travelled almost double the nautical mileage in the Arctic in 2025 compared to 2013. Much of this increase is from fishing boats, which are venturing further north. There has also been a large increase in the number of oil tankers and cargo vessels. Take a look at this shipping tracker data from Baffin Bay between Greenland and Canada, provided by Starboard Maritime Intelligence. These are the paths of cargo ships sailing to and from one of the world's northernmost mines. The bulk carriers in this port are collecting iron ore from the Mary River mine 100 kilometres inland. In 2025, ships like this sailed over 130,000 nautical miles in the Baffin Bay area, compared to just 3,500 in 2013. But when it comes to cargo traffic in the Arctic, it is Russia, with its 15,000-mile-long Arctic coastline, that is leading the charge. These are Russia's oil and gas reserves in the Arctic. And take a look at this liquefied natural gas plant on the Yamal Peninsula, opened by Russia and China in 2017. Before then, very few gas tankers came this way, but as we can see on these maps, it is now a busy route. This image captured in August 2025 shows an LNG tanker loading up before a delivery to EU ports. The EU is stepping up bans on Russian LNG exports because of the war in Ukraine, and increasingly this gas is heading to China. This map shows the route of the LNG tanker Nikolai Urvantsev travelling to China and then making a stop in South Korea. This is known as the Northern Sea Route, or NSR. The Centre for High North Logistics estimates the number of vessels transiting through the NSR in 2025 was the highest ever, with vessels making over 100 trips carrying over 3 million tons of cargo, mainly from Russia's western ports to China, a number which dwarfs the amount transported across the top of North America via the fabled Northwest Passage. In the not too distant future, a summer sea route using icebreaker ships will be possible at the North Pole itself. Russia certainly isn't waiting for global warming to clear a path for its tankers. It has the world's largest fleet of icebreakers for that. We compiled a list. Russia has 42. The largest, like the Arctica, are known as heavy icebreakers. They can carve through ice around 5 to 9 feet deep and are designed to operate year-round. Russia has 13 of this variety. The US just 1. And this is it, the US Coast Guard's Polar Star. It was built in the 1970s and a replacement is long overdue. This satellite image shows the ship in a dry dock in California in May 2025, where it received a $75 million overhaul. There's unlikely to be another before 2030, according to the US Coast Guard. By comparison, since 2018, Russia has built 8 new heavy icebreakers. 4 of them are nuclear-powered, making them ideal for operating along the Northern Sea Route because they don't need to refuel. This satellite image shows their construction at the Baltic shipyard in St. Petersburg.
Суда такого высокого ледового класса имеют для нас стратегическое значение.
These icebreakers are already the most powerful in the world, but the Rossiya, being built at the Zvezda shipyard in eastern Russia at a cost of $2.7 billion, is likely to be twice as powerful.
И вновь повторю, развитие этого важнейшего транспортного коридора позволит России полнее раскрыть свой экспортный потенциал.
This is the path of the icebreaking tug Urubay leaving the Yamal LNG port in February 2026, clearing a path for tankers. Thermal imaging cameras on board satellites and provided by Constella show the same path, but this time measuring changes in temperature. Clear water exposed by the icebreaker show up in warm colours. And this is the path of the Sibir nuclear icebreaker, as it escorted a dark vessel with no identifying AIS signal out of the eastern Arctic port of Pevek. If trade is heating up, then so too is the rhetoric around security and possible conflict.
There are Russian destroyers, there are Chinese destroyers and bigger.
De renforcer notre posture de défense.
World order as we have known it is under pressure.
After the Cold War, this became a region of international cooperation. But if you come back to our globe, you can see how easily tensions can flare. These are the Arctic nations, and these are their exclusive economic zones, the 200 nautical miles from a country's coast, where they can exploit resources such as oil and minerals.
To understand how close all these countries are and how strategic that is from getting one place to the other in a very short time over the North Pole is extremely valuable from a security standpoint.
But things get complicated when you consider each country's claims to the continental shelf beyond that mark. Russia, for example, claims its rights extend to the North Pole, where it even planted a flag in 2007.
Переносить то, что мы первые. Вот говорят американцы там, ну, мы же ничего не говорили по этому поводу. А Арктика наша всегда была. И то, что мы там первые, это здорово.
Russia's strongman Vladimir Putin sees the Arctic, including Norwegian-owned Svalbard, as part of his sphere of influence. Since the 2010s, Russia has been strengthening its military bases in the Arctic. This is the Kola Peninsula, the heart of Russia's military presence in the Western Arctic. Ports, submarine bases and airfields designed to project power to neighbouring Europe and out across the Arctic to North America. This is a Russian submarine at a base near Murmansk, seen in 2022, most likely a nuclear-powered ballistic missile sub. And this is a recently expanded network of missile storage bunkers. At the nearby Severomorsk 1 airbase, you can make out maritime patrol aircraft and Sukhoi fighters. As you can see, this airport has been significantly upgraded with new taxiways and parking aprons. Recent military exercises by both Russia and NATO resemble the cat-and-mouse games of the Cold War. The war in Ukraine and Finland and Sweden joining NATO has raised the possibility of a hot war spilling into the Arctic. The 2025 Ukrainian drone strikes on the Alenia airbase south of Murmansk destroyed several Tu-95 aircraft. A number of nations have accused Russia of operating a shadow fleet to test NATO's responsiveness, while also threatening Europe's undersea cables. Russia has also been caught running its submarines and spy ships toward the Atlantic through what's known as the GI-UK Gap, the maritime choke point between Greenland, Iceland and the UK.
So the whole region has, for the Russians, been a zone of militarization over the last decade or more, to say nothing of the hypersonic missile testing that they conduct in the Arctic as well.
In October 2025, Russia carried out its annual nuclear drills, with ballistic missiles fired from the Plesetsk Cosmodrome, from a submarine in the Barents Sea, and cruise missiles from bomber aircraft, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. Meanwhile, NATO has been mounting a response. Since Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, the alliance has established 9 battle groups along its eastern flank, most with around 1,000 permanent troops each. The most recent was set up in Finland in 2026, NATO's first in the Arctic Circle. For the most part, NATO's joint focus in the Arctic has been on short-term exercises. 25,000 service members from 14 NATO nations participated in the Cold Response military exercise in March 2026. This included around 4,000 US Marines. This chart, compiled by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, shows how NATO and allied countries' military exercises and maneuvers in the Arctic are keeping pace with Russia, a modern-day arms race in the far north. Recently acquired satellite imagery, analysed as part of a joint media investigation, appears to show Russia building new military structures, including barracks, ammunition storage sites, as well as long lines of military vehicles. These are some of Russia's largest Arctic bases. Many have been upgraded to include long runways, satellite stations, and advanced weaponry. On the runway of the Rogachevo base, you can make out an early warning and control aircraft. And here on Wrangel Island, just 300 miles from the Alaskan coast, you can see the construction of a star-shaped accommodation block, as well as a Sopka-2 radar installation. This is most likely an early warning radar network to detect incoming aircraft. There is a similar facility at Severny Kleva, Russian for northern clover. It refers to the design that makes it easier for soldiers to reach its sprawling facilities without needing to go outside. And here's another on the Franz Josef Land archipelago, Russia's northernmost military base, only 640 miles from the North Pole.
President Putin in particular is absolutely committed to making Russia as large as it possibly can be. And that might involve, for example, taking parts of Ukraine. It might well yet involve taking Svalbard, a Norwegian territory. And it's certainly going to involve making Russia the most enormous Arctic Ocean power that it can possibly be.
Meanwhile, the story of the US military footprint at the top of the globe has largely been one of decline. The US has never had a military base on home soil within the Arctic Circle, but it took control of the Alaskan subarctic during World War II.
Yankee troops storm Attu Island, Jap base in the western Aleutians. American land power.
During the war, the US built roughly 300 military installations throughout Alaska, including several bases here in the Aleutian Islands. The US saw the islands as a vital defense against Japanese expansion. Today, many of the military sites here are abandoned and overgrown.
Then after the Cold War, our competency in the Arctic diminished. We had no reason to be up there. Everything was prefaced on peace and cooperation.
And I think across the North American Arctic, you see this repeated over and over again. Infrastructure being built for all kinds of strategic military imperatives. And then when circumstances changed, things are just left, abandoned.
This is Attu Island, the far western point of the Aleutian Islands. US soldiers fought a deadly battle here to liberate the island from the Japanese in 1943. South of the old Japanese settlement is an abandoned American air station and naval base. Nearby Kiska Island was also occupied by the Japanese. This is all that remains of their runway and submarine base, and you can still make out the wreck of the Japanese transport ship, the Borneo Maru. Further along the island chain is Adak, a former US Navy base. It closed in 1997. Some US officials have proposed reopening the base to counter Russian and Chinese activity in the North Pacific and Bering Sea.
It would enable up to 10x the maritime patrol reconnaissance aircraft coverage of that key and increasingly effective space. We should reopen ADAC, and we should enhance the ability to operate out of Erickson.
Erickson is this small air station east of Attu. Only around 200 people live here full-time, and their main mission is to service this radar. It forms part of a network of long-range radar systems across Alaska and Canada that monitor incoming threats like ballistic missiles. But experts say these radars from the 1980s are outdated against modern cruise missiles. And the network is racking up costs as the sites are threatened by climate change. This radar at Olektok Point is one of the many along Alaska's northern coast being consumed by a coastline receding by as much as 80 feet each year. In August 2025, the US and Canada sent service members to Adak and across the state for a training exercise. But for now, the only permanent military presence in the Aleutians is Erickson, and the Coast Guard, equipped with just one cutter at any given time.
It's really something of a mystery why the US has long neglected our Arctic territory, which is virtually only Alaska, in order to project sovereignty in a region that we possess, that is part of our country. We need to have a presence, and one security cutter in the Bering Sea for all of Alaska is a joke.
The US still has 20,000 active duty personnel stationed in Alaska, which is under half the number stationed here at the peak of the Cold War. They're concentrated inland near Fairbanks and Anchorage, where Air Force bases house over 100 fifth-generation fighters. But despite the air strength, there are currently no naval bases in Alaska. Some World War II era bases like Kodiak Naval Base and Sitka Naval Base were reduced to Coast Guard stations and civilian airports.
This idea of needing to be an Arctic nation and then forgetting how to be an Arctic nation, not instilling the importance of the region to our national security and the people who are protecting it, is one of the fundamental things that we've lost since the Cold War.
Meanwhile, construction timelines for the Golden Dome defense system extend into the 2030s, with billions already pledged to an array of sensors and to modernization efforts at Bitufik Space Base in Greenland. We hadn't forgotten about Greenland, threatened with compulsory purchase or invasion from perhaps the least expected source, its ally and protector, the United States.
To think that now all of a sudden we will just possess another Arctic nation and become an Arctic superpower is bonkers. It's not that the Russians' trainings are better, it's that they're there all the time. They live there, they have troops who are stationed there year round, they do their basic training up there.
At one stage in World War II, the US operated around 20 military installations here, including several small weather stations, a naval facility, and 4 airfields which served as refueling stops for planes on the way to Europe.
One of the things that's worth noting is how important Greenland was as a bridge, if you will, between North America and Europe.
Since then, the US presence has been in terminal decline. Bluey East 2 is an old American airbase in eastern Greenland. Abandoned in the 1950s, you can still see in these images some of the 10,000 rusting fuel barrels left behind. Here at Bluey West 4, there's barely a trace of the former airstrip. The other 2 US airfields remained active during the Cold War, but are now owned by Greenland for civilian use. Today, the only permanent American military post in Greenland is Bitufik Space Base. After evicting the native people who lived here, the US and Denmark built the base together in the 1950s to stage long-range bombers closer to the Soviet Union and China. It now specializes in missile defense and radar surveillance, but only has a permanent population of 650, compared to 10,000 at the height of the Cold War. Some see the talk of needing to claim Greenland for the sake of US national security as a smokescreen to hide decades of American underinvestment in its Arctic defences. And the US doesn't need to invade if it wants to build back its military strength here.
In reality, Greenland already offers the US everything it needs for national security. However, we've long neglected that ability, and we've also neglected the one base that we do have there in the north. We haven't built out its capabilities, we haven't staffed it more, we haven't placed defensive capabilities there, we haven't increased the surveillance capabilities of it, and those are just fundamental things that we could have done before even ratcheting up the rhetoric over Greenland.
And like US military bases in Alaska, Bitufik is feeling the heat. Arctic temperatures are rising about 3.5 times faster than the global average. A 2023 report to Congress assessed that changes to permafrost posed a moderate to considerable risk to the buildings and structures at Bitufik. The shifting ground has already interrupted hangar operations, and repairs are projected to become more costly. A US Department of Defense report in 2024 into the Arctic acknowledges the lack of investment in this region of strategic competition. In the same year, the US also signed an agreement with Canada and Finland to scale up Icebreaker construction. One contractor, Davy Defense, is spending $1 billion to transform these shipyards in Texas into an Icebreaker factory to mirror Russia's Baltic shipyard.
We have a lot of our favorite players, cruising around the coast, and we have to be careful.
As the US returns its focus to the Arctic, it's perhaps not the North Atlantic they should be worried about, but the North Pacific and China.
For Chinese military ships spotted near Alaska,
says it detected, tracked, and intercepted multiple aircraft.
The US military has sent 4 of its naval destroyers to Alaska.
11 warship joint naval task force between Russia and China.
Even though it is 900 miles away from the Arctic Circle, China declared itself a near-Arctic state in 2018.
Now, in the last 10 or 15 years in Greenland, China, through its various state companies and organizations, attempted to purchase airports, invest in infrastructure, and also help develop the mining sector.
Since then, the Chinese and Russian militaries have begun conducting joint training exercises and patrols, including ones near Alaska. China is also investing in naval capabilities, ships, and drones for the region.
北极涉及国际社会的整体利益。中国在北极的活动旨在促进北极的和平稳定和可持续发展，符合国际法。
China's Arctic push isn't just a military one. It sees the Northern Sea route as its polar Silk Road. This map from Harvard's Belfer Center for International Affairs gives a picture of proposed and active Chinese investments in the Arctic across sectors, including infrastructure, energy, and research.
China's interest in the Arctic is to have a presence, full stop. As it can slowly gain presence and efficiency in the north, then it becomes potentially an issue for the US and potentially an issue for Western nations.
I think what's driving Donald Trump's geopolitical vision is the United States as a large, secure hemispheric power. But whatever happens, I think this is a long-term US investment, and it's about keeping China out of the North American hemisphere.
In Greenland, for example, attempts by China to buy an abandoned Danish naval base and invest in airport infrastructure were vetoed not only by Denmark, but also by the United States.
Trump's fixation on Greenland is, I think, hopeful of preventing Chinese investment that would threaten national security, that would put China and Russia closer to the US physically, geographically. But Greenlanders want to build out their economy, and they're open to trade with nations that aren't friendly to the US.
In all the bluster from the superpowers, there's very little space given to the Inuit, the Sami, and the dozens of other indigenous peoples who live throughout the Arctic.
We don't appreciate being talked about as a commodity, as something you can buy or sell or acquire or take. That is, of course, offensive to all people.
We visited Greenland on its National Day, the 21st of June. Another obstacle standing in the way of those with Arctic ambitions is the growing movement here for autonomy and full independence from Denmark.
89% of Greenland's population are Greenlanders, and we are Inuit.
Kupanuk Olsen is one of the best-known faces of Greenland's independence movement.
Today it's our flag's anniversary. We got it on our National Day in 1985, the same year I was born.
Kupanuk is also a mining engineer and has served as a politician here.
Even though we are only 57,000 people, we have so much to say. And it should be our own voice and not the Danish Prime Minister's voice being heard worldwide, because who we are is so different than the Danish culture.
How do you feel and how do Greenlanders feel about the way that the White House has spoken about Greenland?
Before Trump's interest in Greenland again at the end of 2024, it was almost like illegal to talk about independence. But now we can openly talk about independence. So it's good and bad with the whole thing.
The Trump administration's aggressive stance towards Greenland has upset Europeans and Greenlanders alike and threatened the fabric of the NATO alliance. When Donald Trump Jr. flew to Nuuk in January 2025 on his father's private jet, for many that was the last straw.
When the plane landed, I felt like I got a punch in my stomach. I felt I couldn't breathe for an hour or so. It's so yes, I was a bit afraid in the beginning, but then I started to realize they cannot just take us. It's impossible.
So these visits will not be reassuring. They just cause further unsettlement, and they will cause also, I'm afraid, deep resentment that yet again Greenland looks and feels like a place where great powers can carry out their particular designs.
From above, Trump's vision pulls Greenland into a US stronghold in the northwestern hemisphere, keeping any threat from Russia and China at arm's length. On the ground, Greenlanders told us that they want to share their island and what it has to offer with the world, but they want it to be on their terms. The island is feeling the changing climate, shorter hunting seasons, thinner sea ice, and retreating glaciers. But it's a different man-made threat that is now casting its shadow.